So, as you can see, big fan of all.
Awesome. Yeah, you've got like the whole array back there.
So I guess I'll start by saying who I am. My name is Becca Bearson. I'm a children's librarian at the Rogers Memorial Library in Hudson, New Hampshire. And I will just say that I needed to interlibrary loan some of them because your graphic novels are so popular that they fly off our shelves. And I felt too guilty putting a hold on it and a kid wouldn't have it.
Every time I drive past a library or like go into a library, I always think, I bet my books are here somewhere. And sometimes I check and they're frequently on hold and I always feel like, oh good,
Yep.
somebody has them.
This is the lovely and magical and glittery and shimmery Dana Simpson, and creator and mastermind of Phoebe and Her Unicorn. So what was it like to have the two, for book 2 and 3, you had some really cool introductions to those books.
I did. The way that the first book has the introduction from Peter S. Beagle, who wrote The Last Unicorn. And when I first started doing the strip, I always thought book introductions were cool. Like the first Calvin and Hobbes book has an introduction by Charles Schulz, who did Peanuts. And I always thought it would be awesome to get introductions by cool people. And I was like, well, for my unicorn books, the two people I would most like to get introductions from are Peter S. Beagle and Lauren Faust, who created My Little Pony Friendship is Magic.
And you did it.
Well, I didn't even have to ask Peter. Peter offered. Like,
Really?
Yeah. One day I was on Twitter and I tweeted, without Peter S. Beagle, there would have been no Marigold Heavenly Nostrils. And then Peter started tweeting back to me and I was like, my favorite author is tweeting back at me. And turned out that somebody else ran his social media, but she was like, here, I'm going to show Peter your comic. And then like an hour later, she was like, Peter read it and it's great. And then he offered to he was like, would you like a book introduction? I was like, yes.
Oh my God, yes.
Having just stumbled somehow into getting Peter Beagle, I was like, well, let's ask Lauren Faust then for the second book. And Lauren said yes, and I love her introduction too. And then it was like, where do we go for the third book? Because I already got my number 1 and number 2 choices for books 1 and 2. But Cory Doctorow had written a really favorable review of the books for boingboing.net, and so I was like, maybe, and he said he read them with his kid, so I contacted him and I was like, would you and your kid like to do that? And they were happy to do, and that was amazing. And then after that, I wrote the 4th one myself, and we haven't had any more since then because I sort of felt like any more would be greedy.
So I did notice that the incorporation of the glossaries, and I thought that was really cool. Was that your idea to introduce the vocabulary to kids?
It wasn't actually my idea. It was my publisher said, hey, I think we should start doing this. And I was like, oh, yeah, we should definitely start doing that. I wish we'd thought of that for book 1. I didn't think of it at all, which is, in hindsight, it seems like such a good idea because people always say like that they like that I don't dumb things down for kids, that I don't talk down to them. And the reason that I don't do that is when I was a kid, I liked when adults didn't do that. And anytime I wouldn't know something, then I would get to learn it. And that was fun too. And so I feel like having a glossary in the back where kids can experience, can like learn about concepts and words that are new to them. I think for me as a kid, that kind of stuff was always fun. It's fun for kids now.
And kids know when they're being written down to. They're very clever.
Oh, completely. They do. Kids are smart. They just have fewer experiences so far than adults do. But like I used to love Bloom County, the comic strip Bloom County when I was growing up. And it was super over my head. It was written, I think, with adults in mind, even though it had like cute talking animals and stuff in it. But there was a lot of like political stuff in it too. And I didn't get any of that when I was 9, 10 years old. But then I would like ask my mom, and Mom, who's Al Gore? And then she would tell me, and then I'd know, and I would get to learn something. And I got to learn it from a talking penguin.
Speaking of parents, I'm in love with Phoebe's dad, and with her mom too. But especially when there's moments when she says, "Dad, can I go play this?" And he's like, "Did you beat 5 levels of the dot eating monster, which is Pac-Man?" But
It's totally Pac-Man, yes.
or just the dad's sarcasm he has such great dad humor, and it's nerdy dad humor, which is so funny. I kept wanting to call my dad and send him pictures of certain parts in Phoebe and say, "Dad, look, this is you." Do you have that kind of friendship with your dad?
Actually, my dad's completely different than that. I mean, my dad and I get along fine. I'm not going to like criticize my dad, but I did not have him in mind particularly when I wrote that character. I was kind of trying to write elder millennial nerd dad, which is, my dad is much more of like a blue collar baby boomer guy, because Phoebe's parents are like my age. So Phoebe's dad is based more on like, visually he's based on my friend Ben, who is he has a PhD in computer science.
Wow, that's
And
cool.
also his job is sort of based on, my husband's a systems administrator, which is why Phoebe's dad is a systems administrator. And he's sort of an amalgam of my nerdy male friends and people close to me who are like that. He's not based on one specific person, but he's a type that I'm very familiar with because there's a lot of them represented in my life.
So you're open about that you trans femme, if I can say that
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and I know you're coming out with the book for middle grade readers, which is one of my later questions. But there's one thing that I really was impressed with your series, and that was how you managed to incorporate diversity subtly. Like you weren't making it there unnaturally just so it was there. When you got this amazing opportunity to have Phoebe and Her Unicorn syndicated, were you like, I will use my power for good and was it a great experience? I'd love to hear.
Just to some extent, I always knew I was going to do that. That Max's parents were I knew that years before I put in the strip that Max had gay parents. It was just something I randomly decided one day, oh yeah, Max's parents are lesbians. And also Phoebe's grandfather is Mexican, which has never come up. It's just something I know that might come up eventually. It's kind of, I mean, it's fun to be able to do that, and it's sort of funny when people act like it's a thing. When I get the occasional like 1-star Amazon review. Yeah, I am old enough to have grown up in the era when, like in the 90s, anytime there'd be a queer character, or to some extent like a black character or any character who wasn't just the default person, it would always be
default bad guy.
Yeah, and the whole episode would be about the fact that they were queer or you know, in some other way not the norm, and that's boring for me. I mean, the strip reflects the people that are around me, and not everybody around me is a straight white person, and so it's like just depicting reality and showing a reality where everybody's straight is a very like edited version of reality anyway. I think it's more effort in some ways not to include characters who are different, because the world is full of people who are different.
That is so true. I completely agree. Another question I had was, Marigold Heavenly Nostrils has so many traits that in other characters would make you maybe dislike them, very vain, very self-centered, but yet she's also very open-hearted and thoughtful and kind.
Marigold thinks she's great, and where that leads her is not like, therefore I'm too good to talk to you. It's more like, I'm great, therefore I will share myself with you, that we may all benefit from my awesomeness. And I don't know, I feel like I was dropping her name, but we already talked about her. When Lauren Faust wrote her introduction to the second book, she talks about that a little bit, and about how vanity and even self-confidence are kind of, we sort of as a society treat those as negative things, especially in girls and women. And really, why is self-confidence a bad thing? Why is it bad that Marigold has a lot of self-love? Like, I don't know if I set out consciously to flip that on its head, but I think that kind of is what I'm doing with Marigold. That, like,
It is. It's very
it's okay to
groundbreaking in
think
some ways.
it's okay to look at yourself and think, yeah, I'm really great, and I'm gonna share me with the world. I think more people should do that. I think people should feel free to do that, and I think kids should understand that they're free to do that.
I completely agree. And then another great thing that you captured is how complex and ever shifting adolescent female friendships can be. Complicated. You start off as an enemy, you become a frenemy, you don't know where you stand, you need the charts like Phoebe had. And I can't bring myself to dislike Dakota because I don't even think Dakota knows why she's acting the way she is sometimes. I don't think she even knows.
Couple things about Dakota. She's not based on any one real person either, but she's also kind of an amalgam of people. She's kind of a few different female friends I had when I was growing up who would be like maybe your friends in elementary school, and then in middle school you hate each other, and then maybe in high school you're friends again. And I did have a few that were like that, where people would just be like, yeah, I was terrible to you in middle school, sorry. And it was middle school, I was being terrible too. And yeah, I mean, your personality is shifting so much. Who you are in relation to other people is shifting so much. And yeah, it would feel unnatural if I kept Phoebe and Dakota locked into any one relationship. I didn't necessarily decide what direction their relationships would go in.
And speaking of interesting, having a unicorn who has cell reception, what's so clever is so many authors of both kidlit and children's, they don't really sometimes know how to handle the modern technology, and they would rather think that kids, they don't get a phone until they're like 12, which is not true. They get a phone when they're so young now, 7.
Oh, it's true.
And so you can't really have a realistic portrayal of a child if you don't include that social media and technology, because it's such a huge part of their identity and how they're forming their identity. Did you have so much fun with that? Because it seemed really fun.
It really is fun. I mean, I don't have kids myself, but my nieces and nephews all knew how to use a phone by the time they could read. It seemed like it's just a thing with kids now, and that's helpful for me to know because I have a phone sitting on the table next to me. It's like part of my hand a lot of the time, and it would be almost weird writing a character who didn't have that relationship with technology. So much of our world, so much of my daily life revolves around that I'd feel sort of constrained as a writer if I weren't allowed to talk about it. And so I find fun ways to talk about that involve unicorns.
And I love what happens when they lose part of technology. When the power goes out, she just did not know what to do with herself. And
there's another strip too where they're riding through the woods together, and Phoebe's like, almost, yes, we're out of range, I don't have any signal right now. Do you know that feeling where it's almost a relief, you don't quite know what to do with yourself, but at the same time it's like, there is no point in my checking Twitter right now, so
freedom.
Yes, exactly.
I loved it. I felt that. I was like, and you kind of want to create a situation for yourself to lose the phone, but you're too scared to. So you're like, maybe I'll forget it in the freezer.
Yeah, but you like it when you plan it, but if you're not planning it and it just happens, then you feel like something's been taken away from you.
I was reading that story about Katie Shampoo and the Florence area, who wrote to the Hampshire Gazette to ask about corn. And she asked, I was like, man, she took all the good questions to ask. It was
a great interview. I've had plenty of adults interview me and not nail it the way that kid did. She's got a future in journalism, or would if I thought that journalism as a profession deserved her. She might be too good for it.
They don't deserve her. She should, I don't know, interview really great altruists and get charity and use her positive people power for that.
I'm allowed to criticize journalism because I was a newspaper reporter at one point.
Oh yes, I did read that. Well,
yeah, not for very long, for like a year right after college, and it was more responsibility than I wanted when I was 22. So because I just wanted to make comics, so I went and like got a temp job and then went home every day and made Ozy and Millie.
That's so cool. Has that happened to you before, where a child who's loved your creation so much that they've actually impacted whether a library carries it or a newspaper runs it?
As far as I know, that's the only time it's happened with a newspaper, although I would love to be corrected about that. I would love it if that was a regular thing. As far as libraries and stuff go, though, I know that's happened a few times, that kids will request it, and that's really sweet. I mean, I have said to a number of aspiring writers, and I kind of think this is good advice for a lot of people, if you want to like your audience, write for kids, because kids are just the most amazing fans. They're so joyful and enthusiastic and about stuff that they like. And when we as adults like stuff, it's always we're sort of demanding of it in ways that kids aren't. Like the petition to redo the last season of Game of Thrones. It's like adult fans feel entitled sometimes. Adult fans have to dissect stuff and figure out what is and isn't good about stuff that they like. When kids like something, they just like it. There's just this joy to it.
It's so magical. What was it like to basically win the American Idol of syndication competition?
Yeah, it was amazing and also kind of stressful while it was going on. I had given up on my dream of newspaper syndication by that time. Even like years before I ended Ozy and Millie, I pretty much decided, well, this isn't working out. I used to send Ozy and Millie every few months and get a bunch of rejection letters. And after a few years of that, I just was like, that's probably not going to happen. And then I did it as a webcomic for another 5 years, but I was pretty sure that was never going to happen for me. And I had ended Ozy and Millie. I was kind of moving on to other things. And then a friend emailed me and was like, hey, have you heard of this comic strip superstar contest? And I was like, okay, I'm as qualified to win this as anybody. For those, yeah, it's like she described it. It was like the American Idol of comics. It was like a talent search that they had. And the prize was you got a development deal to do a syndicated comic strip for newspapers. No guarantee you would actually get your strip syndicated, but you had a development contract for it. And also, I got my first book contract out of that. I had a couple weeks. I came up with this strip, and it didn't have a unicorn in it yet. It was called Girl, and it starred a little girl who was friends with like talking animals in the forest behind her house. And I came up with 12 strips and sent them in, and I honestly kind of forgot about the whole thing for a few weeks. And my husband was like, hey, did you know you're in the top 250? And I was like, of what? And he showed me, and I was like, oh, right, I entered that. Oh, wow. And so after that, I was following it obsessively. And then I was in the top 100, and then I was in the top 50, and then I was in the top 10, by which time I was a raw bundle of nerves.
I can imagine.
10. What if I win? What if I don't? I kind of wanted to just go to sleep for a couple weeks and until I could wake up and somebody could tell me the results and I could move on. Because getting to the top 10 was itself pretty awesome. The judges for that contest were people whose names I knew, like Gary Trudeau from Doonesbury, and I think Lynn Johnston from For Better or For Worse was on that. Mark Tatuli from Heart of the City. Just people whose work I had read, in some cases since I was a kid. And then we got to the top 10, and that was where the internet got to vote. And I think of the 10 finalists, I was the one who already had an internet audience, because I'd done Ozy and Millie for almost 10 years before that. And so I was like, hey, audience, I know I stopped doing Ozy and Millie 6 months ago, but if you're still listening, would you please vote? And I think that might be how I won.
Oh, that's
I
so
murdered
cool.
my existing audience to come vote for me in this contest, and I think that might be what put me over the top. And I won, and I always describe it as being like that moment in Star Wars when Luke's shot goes into the hole in the Death Star, and he's like, "Oh my God, I did it!" And it felt like that. And then it was still I had a 2-year development contract. I used the entire 2 years. The unicorn didn't show up until partway into the development process. But then it was like, oh, that should be the strip, A Kid and a Unicorn. That seemed like a strip that somebody should already have done. And so I did it. And up until then, development was kind of a struggle. It was like the initial excitement of winning had worn off, and I was developing this strip.
So there's pressure.
There was pressure, and I would send in my 30 strip ideas every month, because that was what under the development contract, I had to send in 30 roughs. I didn't have to do any finished work, but I had to like write 30 strips and send in rough versions of them every month. And my editor at the time was a guy named John Glenn. John is now the president of the company, but at the time he was something. It was a vice president of some kind, and he was also my editor right after the contest. And I love John. John is fantastic. His notes are not always super helpful. He would write me. There was one that he would give me a lot, NTF, which stood for not that funny.
Oof.
Yeah, that one was tough.
Oh, that's like getting red marker all over a paper you thought you did well on.
It was so much like that. I have in fact described it as being like getting your homework back and it's covered in red ink. It was every month it was like that, and I'd get my strips back and they'd just be all marked up, and John would write stuff on them like funnier, or one time he just wrote more. And fortunately, another editor too. Her name was Sheena, and she was like a secondary editor. And Sheena is my main editor to this day, and she's great, and her notes are very helpful. And John, I like John. Sometimes his notes are helpful. A lot of the time, I just ended up coming away from it all feeling very discouraged. John told me at one point, it's a really tight market for comic strips. What you're handing in is good. He said it's better than some stuff that's in print now, but in a market this tight, it can't just be good. It has to be transcendent. And I was like, if it's not transcendent now, I don't know how I'm going to make it transcendent, because I was doing my best as far as I was aware. And I started feeling really discouraged. And then one day, this unicorn shows up. It was like just one day, this one rough I drew, I thought of a joke where the kid, who I had named Phoebe by this time, was talking to a unicorn. And then it all just clicked. It was like, right, that's the comic. That's what we're doing. And I showed that to them, and they were like, yeah, do that. And the strip started running online a few months after that.
I'm so excited about your graphic memoir that's coming up. And
yeah, I hope people like it.
Well, it sounds like that's about your experience, and it's going to be for middle grade, so maybe a little older. And I personally, if you try to do a display of books during August, it's so hard to find ones for kids that's not nonfiction and not teen. There's very few that's fun, engaging, and actually real that's they'll want to read. And I think definitely feel like when it comes out, it's going to be used in a lot of displays come August, if that's the
I really hope so. Middle grade seems to be the niche that I kind of fall into. Like, I didn't actually set out necessarily to write for any particular age group. It's just sort of what my sensibility ended up being. And that's what would come out when I would try to write. But that does seem to be where I always land, kind of the level that I'm speaking on. Maurice Sendak said in an interview that I saw with him once from Where the Wild Things Are, I think he was being interviewed by Stephen Colbert, and Colbert was like, so you write for kids? And Sendak was like, oh, I write for me, and they tell me it's for kids. That's kind of how it always feels for me, that I'm writing for myself, and I just have this sensibility where it always ends up being like middle grade. Yeah, my memoir is something different. This is a project I've been kicking around for years. even before Phoebe. I back when I transitioned a long time ago. In any case, it was a long time ago, and I started saying even before I was through it that someday I was going to write the trans Persepolis. Do you know Persepolis?
Nice. I
love
do.
Persepolis. Persepolis is
It's
great.
one of my staff picks sometimes.
I should not be at all surprised that you're a fan of Persepolis because you seem to have good taste, and Persepolis is great.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to write that, but instead of being about being a girl during the Iranian Revolution, it'll be like being a trans girl in Seattle in the 1980s, and which is completely not the same book at all. But I hadn't read a lot of graphic memoirs at the time, so that was my reference for them. I've read a lot of them since then because there's so many good ones. And
I just finished Blue. It's so good.
One day I haven't read that one yet. I need to. It's on my list. One day I accidentally told this to my publisher, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we'd publish that." And so then I had to actually do it.
You're like, "Oh man, I almost wished you would say something elsewise." So
yeah, so I could just say that it was something I was gonna do eventually. I have to like actually figure out how to do it. And
it
then
makes me think of Phoebe when she's talking about procrastinating.
Yeah, it was something I was seriously procrastinating doing, and we have pushed the release date on that back a few times. Now it's going to come out. I've actually handed in like an early version of it. So
congratulations.
Less than a year, hopefully. But it was originally the original date on the contract that I signed was 2017, and obviously we didn't make that. I hope that it's an interesting book for people. It's different than anything I've done before because it's directly about me, and I've been having to go to people who are like real people who are in it and be like, "Do you mind that you're in my book? I won't use your name if you don't want me to." The one person who was like, "I don't know, I want you to use my name or my real appearance," was my mom.
Oh,
and I was like,
man.
Okay, but I think people are going to figure out who the Dana's mom character is based on. But
that is so funny.
But I think I will draw my mom. I have drawn my mom in a way that it kind of looks like her. I don't know. I'll okay it with her before we go to print. She's okay with being in the book. She just is kind of, I think, reluctant to have any attention drawn specifically to her, which is a way that my mom and I are really different people.
I love like Marigold. Me.
Marigold is a self-portrait in this way. So is Phoebe. Marigold and Phoebe are me talking to myself.
And I want to say that Sue is my favorite character.
Sue is based on my friend Lucy, who I'm kind of scared of. Lucy's
I am
great.
A Sue.
Scary. I could see it in a good way.
I love her. She's like, oh yeah, she'll just say, oh yeah, random very weird things, but totally normal.
If Sue were the main character, the strip would have a really, really different tone.
Lots of red tones.
We'll be seeing Sue more this summer.
Yes.
In the strip, she'll be coming around. There's a storyline that we always see her in the summer. Have we ever seen her any other time of year? She's usually we see Tex sometimes, but she's like the summer camp character. And this summer we'll be seeing Sue some more. So I'm excited about writing that.
And I mean, as somebody who's gone to Jew camp every summer from like 7 to 12, I totally know what a summer camp friend is. I totally get it. You see them, you live with them for months, and you become really bonded because how else can you when you're living with somebody for such an intense amount of time, and then you never see them for the year, and then you go back and it's like you've joined the sisterhood again.
Yeah, and you kind of go back and you worry that maybe I've changed too much, maybe I got weird, but then you just kind of pick up where you left off. I used to go to music camp in the summer when I was younger, which is where Phoebe going to music camp comes from. And yeah, I had camp friends, people that I would see after a year of not seeing them, and you just sort of pick up. Even though when you're that age, you feel like you're changing really fast. Then you go back to camp and you're your camp self again.
Yep. And that's not necessarily the self that you thought you were. It's the self that you can't hide.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's an opportunity to reinvent yourself and sort of shed some of the baggage that your regular everyday identity picks up and be maybe a different side of yourself for some different people. People at music camp thought I was cooler. Nobody at school thought I was cool. At music camp, I was like at least marginally capable of being cool. And then you go back to school and you're the dorkiest of the dorks again. That was my life.
So music camp, you're a Dakota, but at school, you're a Phoebe.
School, you're back to Phoebe, or even like Max, who, by the way, is based on my husband.
He's so sweet.
I am good. I'm glad that comes across.
He's
Yeah,
so
Max
sweet.
is even like physically drawn to look a bit like my husband. My husband has really long hair, but other than that, he looks like Max.
He's so gentle, and I really think that he doesn't even realize that he has something special, and he's just cool with who he is, because there's moments where Phoebe doesn't even realize why. She'll be like, "How did you get it? How'd you be like that? You don't even care. How do you do that?" And he's
How are you doing?
going into a trash can at the moment, and she's like, "Man, being cool with yourself must be like a summer breeze." And he's like, "It's more like stale tater tots from down here."
Have you ever noticed that Max and Ozy are basically the same character?
Yep, 100.
Because they're based on the same real person. They're both based on my husband.
I did notice that, and I was like, I wonder if that was a purpose. It had to be on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. Max and Ozy are both based on my husband, David, who was not yet my husband. He was just my best friend when Ozy and Millie started, but he's been in my life since we were teenagers.
And I love how in both Ozy and Millie and Phoebe, you have the two main characters that they have a moment where they're just under the stars looking up, and just they have a moment, and it's so nice.
I have those with my husband sometimes too. We've started going camping again. Like we hadn't in years, but in the last year we started going out again. Just go out. I live in California, and you go out like into the desert, and if there's no moon, you look up at the sky and you can just see the Milky Way, and there's so many stars, and it's often those strips happen right after I've been looking at the sky with him myself.
Were there any so all of your characters felt genuine, and I could tell that they were based off of real people. Were there any characters that were more difficult than others to write? Were all characters based off of real people, or was there one like that maybe was more fictional than others?
Um, uh, they're all kind of based on real people, but some of them are more directly based on real people than on others. Like I said before about Phoebe's dad, he's kind of an invented character. He's not based on any one person. He's more like a type that's well represented in my life, but that's reasonably easy to write if you know a bunch of people who are a certain way. Writing a character like that is easier. Where it gets hard is writing characters who are nothing like anybody that's in my life. Like Phoebe's piano teacher he's this sort of cranky old former jazz musician, which is not, I don't really know anybody directly who's like that. He's kind of based on music teachers I had when I was a kid and stuff, but I'm sort of reaching further outside myself and my current life trying to write a character like that, which is part of why you don't see him more.
I love the teacher in Ozy and Millie.
Which one? The classroom teacher, Mrs. Sarkowitz?
The one who said, "Mom," Millie goes, "Mom, I got an A today." She goes, "Oh, you did? Wait, Millie, these are a lot of A's. They're just, ah."
I got so many A's. Yeah, Mrs. Sarkowitz, who is a kangaroo for no reason. Pretty much every character in Ozy and Millie just has an arbitrary species. People pointed out that the bullies are rabbits and sheep, and the bullied kids are like foxes. So I got the predator-prey thing stood on its head, but that was kind of a coincidence. Yeah, originally she was supposed to kind of be based on several of my elementary school teachers, but ultimately in the end I kind of think she ended up just being Mrs. Wormwood from Calvin and Hobbes. I think I kind of unconsciously fell back on that trope.
Kids still check out Calvin and Hobbes today too, and Garfield.
I am happy that the stuff that I was into, at least some of the stuff that I was into when I was young, has had that kind of staying power. People do still love Calvin and Hobbes.
They're an 811.54 nonfiction.
I am very pleased that I get to be published by the same publisher that Calvin and Hobbes had. Like, I look at the Andrews McNeil publishing logo on the spine of Calvin and Hobbes books that I have on the shelf, and it's like, that's my publisher now. And
that's so exciting.
I'm in proximity to greatness.
You need some Marigold. Be like, I belong here. I'm going to, 100 years from now, I will be considered one of the founding greats.
That is my attitude, yeah. That's my inner Marigold says that. I always say the Marigold is like the voice in my head that goes, yeah, you're amazing, without any of the other voices. Like, yeah, but here's your flaws. Like,
no.
Marigold is just my isolated, pure ego.
And there's nothing wrong with that, which is a huge
absolutely.
Success.
Marigold isn't selfish. Well, I mean, she can be sometimes, but mostly she just has a high opinion of herself. She just has a lot of self-love.
And fashion. And
Phoebe is more of a straight-up self-portrait. Phoebe is me if you made me 9 years old. That's
she's
just like who
so clever and likable.
Oh, thank you. On behalf of Phoebe. Oh, my mom reads the strip every day.
Really? That's so cool.
Yeah. It's in the newspaper that she subscribes to. She said that she keeps subscribing to it only because I'm in it. And the News Tribune in Tacoma, Washington.
I'm sure their newspaper sales thank her.
She said that I love reading it every day because Phoebe is you. And I was like, yeah, Phoebe is really heavily based on me. She was like, no, Phoebe is you. I'm like, I know, well, you're my mother, you would know. Apparently, I'm not disguising that Phoebe's a self-portrait, like, at all. At least not from my mom.
I think she'll see right through the sneaky character of her when you do the memoir, and she's going to be like, I am not buying it.
I'm so close to just writing a self-portrait anyway, but flipping it over into a memoir isn't actually that far of a trip.
I totally agree. I love how you have such true comments about more adult things that I think parents will see that maybe kids won't pick up on, such as, oh yeah, I'm getting ready for a standardized test. That's when I fill in a bunch of dots and I feel like a robot and I get a number that I have no clue what it means. Or when the teacher goes in Ozy and Millie, oh, we're gonna, hold on a second, I noted all the pages, which was every page, so.
Which almost defeats the purpose, but I understand the impulse.
It was every page, so now I'm just going through and looking for the one. Oh, of course, I'll just look for the one that was right. Okay. When she goes, you'll all be required, the zebra goes, you gotta sell magazine subscriptions. This is perfectly fair. It's not as if all the sports teams get all the money they want and then some. Oh no, the invitation values all kids equally. They must. They say it must be true. And then Millie says, it's weird when teachers get sarcastic. And Oz goes, oh, well, I'm not sure they're paid enough to be sincere.
Yeah, a good friend of mine who's a music teacher really liked that storyline in particular. And I was basing it on some of my own bitterness from high school too, because I was in band in school. Ozy and Millie play the saxophone because I played the saxophone in school. And so I had to do, because I was in band, they made me do marching band for the football games and stuff. And the football teams get new uniforms every year, and we were wearing uniforms that were literally older than we were because the school just, weren't even hiding their priorities. And I suspect that's a pretty common thing. That's activities that aren't sports kind of feel shafted. And that's me being bitter about it.
Well, it might be bitter, but it's also true.
commentary. Yeah, oh, absolutely it is. And those strips tend to be popular with people who work in schools, particularly in music departments.
Or arts. Anything that's not arts is getting budgets cut now. It's very sad.
It is very sad. I don't know if I'd be doing what I am doing now if there hadn't been space to be creative in school. I think it's, and even if you don't end up being a cartoonist for a living, I think it's an important part of getting educated. I would love it if that trend could be reversed and schools would start properly funding arts. I think it's really important.
And even when Phoebe starts a diary, she doesn't realize how she's gonna get so addicted to it. It's like and I think it's because she wanted somebody who would listen as much as she would want to listen, which was herself.
Yeah, and she has that in common with Marigold. I don't think I emphasized that in that storyline, but I could have, because that's totally a Marigold thing. She found her inner Marigold for a bit during that storyline.
And Marigold was the one who even told her to start a journal, which was really interesting.
I'll have to go back and reread that. One of these days, something I have to do is reread all of it. Like, I did a reading of Unicorn Bowling, the newest one, at a convention recently for like in the kids area at Babs Con in San Francisco, the My Little Pony fan convention. They had like a kids area,
That's
and
so cool.
I and my friend Tabitha St. Germain, who plays Rarity and Princess Luna on the show, did a reading. We read like all of Unicorn Bowling. Yeah, Tabitha does all the voices well. I do none of them well. And so we sort of trade off. But even though that's the newest book, those strips are from like 2016 because we're a couple years behind. And so I had forgotten I wrote some of them. And so every once in a while we'd get to something that I had sort of forgotten I wrote, and I would just start laughing. Like I got to experience my own writing as a new reader because it had been a couple of years. And it made me think, I gotta go back and just like reread all of this. Sometime soon, I'm gonna sit down and just reread all 9 Phoebe and Her Unicorn books. And I bet I've completely forgotten some funny stuff. And I also feel like it would help me not to like accidentally write the same thing twice. My editor told me to stop doing the joke about how unicorn is actually from the words unique and orn. She told me to stop doing that joke so much. She's like, no one thinks that's as funny as you do, but I think that's funny.
It's really funny.
It was funny once. I've done it a few times. I
wonder how many kids believe it and tell their friends that is true, in fact.
And then it's one of those things where people go like their whole childhood believing it's true, and then they get to college and someone corrects them and they feel dumb. You're welcome, kids.
I really want that to be a thing. I need that to happen in like some kids' English 101 class.
I want to hear about it if it does happen, so I can send that kid an autographed apology. I was at the Orange County Library's Comic Day in Tustin, California a few weeks ago.
Maybe one day you could come to our library in beautiful New Hampshire, not in the winter, because it's cold.
I've never been to New Hampshire before. Invite me.
We shall.
Please do. I will. I often take whatever excuse to go places I've never been before. I mean, I've visited places that I had never visited or only occasionally visited, like in the course of doing my job, and I feel like the fact that I get to travel and do stuff like now is a fun part of my job.
Do you have a fall release anytime soon? Because the New Hampshire is very beautiful with all the leaves changing.
In fact, the next book is coming out in October.
Ooh, that we could look into that. That'd be nice. It's the best place in the country for fall.
The next book is coming out October 8th and is called The Unicorn Whisperer.
I saw it on Goodreads. I got really excited.
Awesome. Yep, that I okayed the final text of it just like this week. So
congrats.
Coming out. Thank you. And also the newest box set of books 5 through 8 is what's 5 through 8? That's Unicorn Crossing, Magic Storm, Unicorn of Many Hats, and Unicorn Theater.
Yes. Well, is that going to have the same cover, a special edition cover?
It'll have it. Have you seen the first box set of the first 4 books? It was called the Big Sparkly Box of Unicorn Magic, and it had like, yeah, it's just the 4 books in a cool box that has art on it.
That's the thing about libraries. Anything that comes in a box or stickers, it won't last.
Oh, totally.
Kids, oh, we struggle to just have Rick Riordan's The Lightning Thief in one piece. Dog Man.
Oh, yeah. Dog Man. Last I checked, that's like #1 on the New York Times bestseller series list.
It's crazy.
Yeah, Dog Man was
Remier's Smile.
Harry Potter was #3. Oh yeah, yeah. Have you ever met Raina? Raina is super sweet.
I haven't, but this is going to be my first time this summer meeting her at BookCon or Book Expo.
She's extremely nice.
I'm so nervous. I feel guilty because I checked out all her popular books to get them signed.
That's all right. Raina's books are not hard to get your hands on. They sell Raina's books at Target. They sell my books at Target too, but they sell her books at every Target.
They're so appealing to everybody.
Yeah. Weird story about me and Raina Telgemeier.
Oh my gosh, I'm here.
I've known Amara Telgemeier for like 15 years. Like
really?
Since before Raina. Yeah, from who you may know from Sisters. Before I ever knew that Amara even had a sister, I knew her because she is good friends with another friend of mine, and she dated another one of my friends at one point, and she was just like a person I knew, and she's a really talented artist too. And like when Raina got famous, I was like, Amara's sister is famous now.
That's so funny. You're like, you're over here now? In the cool.
Yeah. I didn't expect small world, I guess. And the first time I met Raina, I know your sister.
That is so cool. I have a question about fans. So I know Jay Kristoff just released Aurora Rising, and a funny thing that happens with him sometimes is he gets like fans bring him like giant bottles of whiskey and cupcakes and art and pillows and chocolate, and he'll be like, well, I gotta fly, so I can't take all the stuff with me. Have you ever received like what's like the coolest fan thing that you've received or heard? Feedback, gifts, letters?
It's hard to pick. I get a lot of awesome kids send me art a lot, which is really super awesome. One wonderful kid sent me a like ceramic Phoebe and Marigold that she made. I have it in my studio on a shelf. I have tons of art that kids have made for me, and one of these days, I haven't done this yet, but I keep saying I'm gonna like take down whatever art is on the back wall in my studio and just cover it with children's art, because I think I could at this point. It's that wall all the way back directly behind me. I'm gonna cover that wall.
Oh, I see it. It has a unicorn on it, I think.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you probably can't see that clearly, but there's like a Marigold and Phoebe made out of those like beads that people make art out of. That's like on the wall back there. That's a pretty cool one.
When you go like with the geckos in the 90s where you would have to put them like follow a pattern.
And then you like melt them together, and it's like
Mine never made it through the melting.
Actually, this Marigold plush was made for me when I did it. I did another My Little Pony convention, Midwest Brony Fest, 3 years ago. Then they made me a Marigold plush.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
That is so.
Oh gosh, what else? What else have people given me that's been great? I mean, it's a tie between every piece of art that's ever been given to me by a kid.
Well, at least all of the magic and the children's art will combine to create magical vibes in the studio.
I think so. I think it'll be great for me creatively to have those vibes just sort of radiating into me every day. I have a large collection of kids' art, and I want to look at it every day. I want to hang it all up. I'm just going to spend a whole day doing that sometime.
Well, if our kids mailed you art, would you like respond to them?
I try to.
Because I have
I've,
one little girl who's like big fan.
well, my address for mailing fan stuff to is on danasimpson.com. Feel free to use it. That's what it's there for.
I
I
think I'm gonna
try to.
make her day.
I have a way of getting behind on my responses sometimes, but I try not to get too behind. I try to respond to it.
I mean, the fact that you check it, some authors do not.
I try very hard to, though. I have a P.O. box. I check it every week or two, and usually there's a few more every week at least. Yeah, it's fun getting stuff from kids. It's one of the most fun things about it. And sometimes they come to me at conventions and give me stuff too, and I sketch stuff for them.
That is so nice. Well, I think that was all the questions. More questions than I even knew I had inside myself.
You'll think of 10 more as soon as we stop.
But I hope I wasn't too chatty.
It's a conversation. You're supposed to be chatting. No, this has been a delight. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much. And maybe when your fall release, we could talk about coming to visit the library, and maybe we could even do an interview about in the fall.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
You know how to get me.
Thank you so much.